I saw everything happen in slow motion. It's strange how the brain processes moments like that. 1 second I was upright. The next I was being flung backward. Everything blurred, a shadowy figure, the ceiling, my feet, and then the ceiling again. The impact was brutal. My upper back hit the ground first with a sickening crunch, and pain exploded through me. It was a sharp, overwhelming sensation. When I finally came to, I thought I was trapped in a nightmare. My head was pounding and my body felt like it was aching in ways I'd never experienced before. I had no idea where I was for a moment. I just lay there trying to gather my bearings. Gradually, I opened my eyes to the blinding fluorescent lights and plain ceiling tiles. The pain was intense, so I didn't move. Even breathing hurt. I wanted to cry out, but I stayed silent. I was trying to make sense of what had just happened. Moving my head sent a jolt down my spine. Glancing sideways hurt. That's when I heard voices nearby, but they sounded distant and muffled. One voice asked, "Do you think he'll make it?" Another replied, "Probably a doctor, but it'll take time." When asked, "When do you think he'll regain consciousness?" the reply was, "He showed signs earlier but slipped back under." The conversation drifted closer and the details started sinking in. They mentioned that I had no cranial bleeding, though there was some. I had swelling and a concussion. My left arm was broken in several places, including the bones in my forearm and upper arm. My back took most of the impact. The doctor explained how my fall started at the shoulder blades and ended with my head slamming into the base of the stairs. My suit jacket saved my skin from being shredded, but my entire back was bruised. I was bruised. I managed to make out bits of their conversation. My fall had been partially broken by the stairs, but they thought I might have broken my sacrum or hip. The way they described it, I'd somehow surfed down 8 or 10 steps before coming to a stop. "What about the woman?" one of the voices asked. She'd resisted being checked, but there was blood on her hands. Gathering evidence, the man's right forearm has gouges running from his hand to his elbow. We'll confirm the cause, but the direction of the injuries doesn't match the fall. They said they'd send forensic reports and mentioned someone grabbing coffee for the officers outside. I listened, trying to calm my racing heart. My monitor beeped steadily, but the sound only on top of that. The curtain around my bed rustled as someone adjusted the tape on my fell. His coat sleeve was pushed up. One voice said that might explain the scratches. Another voice chimed in, saying that a young woman was showing her parents her apartment when the shouting started. They caught a man and a woman on the landing. The guy was dressed in a suit, and he yelled something like, "You'll regret this, loser," before shoving him. My mind reeled as I tried to process what I'd heard. Witnesses had seen and recorded what happened. The voices mentioned a young neighbor pointing me out when officers arrived, accusing the man of pushing me. They also said the man and woman lied, saying I'd tripped over my own feet. It was laughable, though not to me lying there. I thought about everything. Should I tell the truth, or should I turn this to my advantage? He had pushed me. I could have died 3 weeks earlier. I never imagined my life would take such a turn. Abigail, my wife, had left her phone on. While I was showering, I saw a notification on the bathroom counter. It was from my boss, Jeff Russell. He was asking me to meet him for some hot fun tomorrow. This wasn't the first time Jeff had sent me inappropriate messages. Last month, he texted me saying I looked amazing and that he couldn't wait to see me again. Abigail brushed it off, saying Jeff had meant to text his wife, whose name was similar to hers in his contacts. Jeff even called to apologize, saying he'd been trying to spice things up in his marriage. Abigail laughed it off, and I, like an idiot, let it go. This was different, though. There was no excuse. This time it was obvious that Abigail was cheating on me. I had trusted her completely, and our marriage was rock solid. In fact, I was wrong. We met in college, both business majors, but we didn't connect at first. I was your typical nerdy guy, and Abigail was the kind of girl every guy wanted. We weren't supposed to be together. I wasn't awkward, just not athletic, or the type usually seen with someone like her at 5 feet 8 inches and 145 lb. I wasn't exactly built, though my sister and her friends used to say I was decent looking. I joked once that I wasn't a stud and everyone laughed. One time I overheard Abigail telling my sister, "Your brother doesn't. He got teased because he teased back, and let me tell you, he's got nothing to be ashamed of." It left my sister and her friends flustered, but Abigail said it without a hint of embarrassment. She wasn't the kind of woman looking for a rich guy. We managed just fine, though we weren't wealthy. Abigail's real estate work covered her business. Expenses and I took care of the rest with my sales rep job. After college, I worked hard to get my CPA and MBA. I was dreaming of opening my own office someday, which meant long hours and frequent travel to meet clients across the region. When I started suspecting Abigail might be cheating, I paid closer attention. Jeff, her boss, was older. Abigail was in her mid-40 seconds, married with 3 kids. I was single and wanted to have kids, but we hadn't yet. We'd been discussing her going off the pill to try for a baby, but now I was relieved it hadn't happened. I couldn't imagine having a child with someone who could betray me like this. Everything changed. Abigail was in the shower, and I should have been looking forward to what came next. She'd come out smelling amazing, expecting me to start things off gently, like she liked, but I couldn't bring myself to care. I lied, saying I felt unwell, and locked myself in. I went to the bathroom while she went to bed. I stayed up researching ways to spy on her phone. It turned out to be easier than I'd imagined. I installed an app and began tracking her texts and calls. What I found was worse than I expected. Jeff was a relentless flirt. They were sneaking off together multiple times a week. Their messages were shameless. I even recorded a particularly graphic phone call between them. I didn't need it for divorce proceedings. I was already planning to leave her. However, I wanted undeniable proof. One of their conversations stuck with me. Jeff suggested we meet at his place this Thursday. He said he loved bending me over the couch and taking me hard. Abigail responded irritably, saying, "Stop calling George a loser. It's disrespectful." Jeff just laughed and dismissed her. She defended me, saying, "George is just as big as you, if not bigger. You're rougher, though, and I like that sometimes." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. "He prefers making love, but sometimes I want it wild. That's why I keep coming back to you." They kept talking, throwing insults at me between their LWD remarks. Abigail even warned him to wear protection, she said. We were planning to have a baby. Jeff complained about hating condoms. He joked that if it broke, his swimmers might be better than mine. Abigail shut him down. She said that if I got pregnant, George would contest it. "I'd come after you for child support. Do you really want that?" Hearing her say she loved me while carrying on this affair was infuriating. She tried to justify it. She said she wanted something wild occasionally. It was all lies. I saved the recordings and texts. It wasn't just about proving her infidelity. It was about knowing for sure. Over the next 3 weeks, I prepared for the inevitable fallout. First, I paid off all our debts, including my student loans. Abigail didn't make much from her job, and I knew I'd have to pay alimony, so I cleared our accounts strategically. I prepaid my lawyer and reduced our savings. I also started putting some cash away to keep it out of her reach. By the time I filed for divorce, I was numb. A coworker covered for me one day so I could handle everything. At first, I thought about how to confront them. I thought about catching them in bed and chasing Jeff out with a weapon. But I wasn't stupid. Jeff was at least 6 feet 2 inches and 230 lb, a former college football player. I wasn't about to pick a fight I couldn't win. The truth was, I didn't want to end up in jail. My friends all knew I had a concealed carry permit. I had a permit and usually carried a pistol when traveling, but I wasn't about to use it on Jeff. I wasn't trying to be a hero. I just wanted out, and I wanted Abigail to face the consequences when I arrived home and unlocked the apartment door. All my plans unraveled when I saw Jeff's car was parked. I stepped inside, quietly making sure not to jingle my keys. I was hit by loud grunting and Abigail's voice moaning, "Do me harder." There she was, bent over the couch as Jeff thrust into her like an animal. I stood there for a second, my anger boiling over. Then I punched Jeff hard in the side. He yelled, "Get off her," and tumbled off Abigail. I quickly realized what had happened and tried to swing at Jeff, but he grabbed me by the suit coat and shook me like a rag doll. My coat restricted me, and I couldn't reach my pistol. And my kicks barely made an impact. Abigail jumped in and grabbed my arm to stop me from drawing the weapon. She scratched my skin, leaving 3 deep marks. Jeff lifted me up and threw me across the room. I fell down the stairs, and there was a sickening crunch as my body hit the ground. I was lying there in agony, listening to the voices of the police and doctors as they quickly formulated a plan. I groaned loudly to signal that I was awake. The doctor examined me and said that I was lucky to have avoided worse injuries, but I was told to avoid movement for a while when the police asked for my side of the story. I told them what had happened, how I found Abigail and Jeff together, how Jeff threatened me, and how he pushed me down the stairs while Abigail egged him on. I made sure to emphasize that they both knew I was armed. I was worried that I'd retaliate. Did I lie? Absolutely not. Did I feel bad about it? Not one bit. They deserved it. Fortunately, the forensic evidence supported me. Jeff said he was defending himself and had only pushed me after I attacked him. Abigail backed him up, saying she grabbed my arm to stop me from hitting him. I found Jeff's DNA on my clothes, and tests showed I'd been in close contact with him. There was also evidence of fluids on my leg, which meant I must have kicked him in the groin while facing him. This was enough to prove he'd lied about what happened. Jeff was charged with assault and had to pay a $5,000 bail to get out of jail. He had to pay $0 to get out of jail. I wondered if he thought it was worth it. The full story didn't come out until later. My brothers deliberately withheld details, fearing they'd upset me. After giving my statement, I passed out from exhaustion. When I woke up, I was in a dim hospital room. I decided then how I would deal with Abigail and Jeff. If I saw them again, they were cheaters. One of them had tried to kill me. I planned to treat them accordingly. Not long after I woke up, Abigail showed up at the hospital. I told him to get her out of here. She helped him try to kill me. My brother came into the room as Abigail was protesting. He was crying. I said, "I didn't hurt you. I love you, but I wasn't having it. You were in on it. You grabbed my arm to help him throw me down the stairs." I said, "I'm not going to put up with this." My brother came in and escorted her out. While she carried on protesting, I was thinking, why didn't she talk to me if she wanted something different? If she'd asked for a rougher intimacy, I'd have done it, but cheating, I couldn't forgive that. The doctors kept me in the hospital for a week, monitoring my concussion. There was also a chance of brain swelling. My brothers stuck by me, even though they had a hard time believing what I told them about Abigail. One day, I told Greg in a whisper that I had exaggerated her role in what happened. He looked confused and asked why. I said that I could always scale it back later. I wanted her to feel the pain she caused me. She destroyed our marriage the day I was discharged. I told Greg how I'd been monitoring Abigail's phone. I told her I was hurt and angry, but willing to talk when I'm ready. I instructed Greg to give her a little hope before crushing it. I nodded like she did to you, even though I hated admitting it. I still loved her, and that only made the betrayal worse. The day after I woke up, Sharon, Jeff's wife, visited me. She'd heard about the assault charges, but she didn't know the full story. She asked why Jeff was arrested. She was sitting down, looking concerned. He told me he was visiting Abigail because she was upset and you misunderstood. I almost laughed. Jeff was having an affair with Abigail. I told her plainly. Sharon's face darkened. Do you have proof? I nodded. Texts, a phone recording, and even a video of them on the landing after Jeff threw me down the stairs. Sharon looked stunned. You have all that? I nodded again. Jeff liked rough intimacy, didn't he? I asked. She sighed, clearly piecing it together. Yes, I have a plan. If I prove he cheated, I get 70% of our assets. I'm divorcing him after his trial. You should protect your assets too. He might try to hide money. I assured her I had already taken steps, including canceling joint credit cards and diverting funds. Sharon hugged me before leaving, thanking me for the evidence. I took medical leave and vacation time to recover from my illness and went to my family's fishing camp. My boss was understanding and let me work remotely so I didn't lose income. I canceled the remaining credit card Abigail could access, leaving her half of the balance but nothing more. Rent and utilities were paid, but she'd get no additional support until the court ordered it. Sharon acted quickly, securing her 70% share and locking their accounts. Meanwhile, I called Abigail and told her where I was. She'd begged my brothers to let her. I told her to come and talk to me in the hospital, but I said she should come alone. If Jeff shows up, I'll assume he's here to finish the job and act accordingly. I wanted that on record, just in case the meeting with Abigail was emotional, but not in the way I'd hoped. I still loved her, though not as much as before. She said she loved me, but she wasn't staying faithful. I'm glad you let me come to talk. She parked her car as we walked inside, and she immediately started defending herself. She said, "You know I wasn't trying to help Jeff hurt you." I just shrugged and waved. I asked her to grab us some drinks while I set up video recordings aimed at the chair where she'd sit when she returned. She knew the house well and headed to the kitchen for beers while she was busy. I broke the ice with a jab, so, "Are you trying to get me to say something on the record?" I asked Abigail. She smiled and shook her head. "My phone's in my purse," she said before suddenly stripping completely. "I want to do a cavity search," she teased, swaying her hips playfully. She thought this was some kind of kinky. If she hadn't been sleeping with her boss, I might have been tempted to play along. You might want to put some clothes on, I said, trying to keep my composure. She rolled her eyes. Screw that. I'll stay naked. Just hand me a towel so I don't leave a trail on the chair. Are you sure you don't want to check for hidden recorders? Take your time, feel around, she added with a grin. She wasn't being sarcastic. She genuinely wanted to play. Abigail knew exactly how to push my buttons and was using it to her advantage. Let's start with the real questions, I said, leaning forward. I wanted to know why you cheated and why you helped him try to kill me. I was really angry. I could see tears welling up in her eyes. I wasn't trying to help him. I was trying to protect myself, she cried. I had no idea he'd push you. I was just trying to stop him. You from shooting him even when he pushed you outside? I thought he just closed the door so we could get dressed and figure it out. But then he threw you down the stairs. She trailed off, looking horrified. I finished for her and left me lying there unconscious. You didn't even check. Stella, the neighbor, said she knelt by me while you stood there in a rope crying on the landing. Then you went inside, Jeff got dressed, and you both spun a story about me attacking him. Abigail looked away, and I could see guilt etched across her face. How do you even know what we said? She asked the cops, who interrogated me. I replied that they had two liars telling the same story while I told the truth, despite a head injury. Jeff's assault charge proves they didn't believe you. Why did you lie to him? Her voice cracked. I was scared, she admitted. Jeff said if you didn't, he promised me we'd be fine if we kept up the lie. He said maybe you'd have amnesia. I went along with it because if the truth came out, Jeff would lose everything, and we'd both be in legal trouble. I stared at her, dumbfounded. You were willing to risk me dying or losing my memory to protect him? I asked coldly. She broke into sobs, trying to justify it. Jeff thought he could make it up to me somehow. He even offered you money, $150,000 each, to change your story and say. It was all an act, he said. We could use it for counseling, and I could quit my job so we could start over. I laughed bitterly. You expect me to trust him even if he had the money? His wife would notice a transfer like that. He wouldn't risk it. Abigail hesitated. She said softly, he's been hiding money for years. It's in a royal bank account in Jamaica, under his son's name. He promised to share some if you'd change your story, George said. Please, Abigail. We can have a fresh start. You're the one I love. I want a family with you. I shook my head, smiling at her. Abigail looked thoughtful for a moment, but then shook her head. We can trust him, she said weakly. Desperation. Do you really think Jeff would follow through? He'd laugh at how gullible you were and how dumb I'd be for falling for it too if that money even exists. It's for him, not us. Fine, I replied, letting sarcasm drip from my words. Show me proof. I want to see a bank transfer with routing and account numbers. Until then, forget it. Let's move on. Why did you let that guy into your bed? Was I not enough for you anymore? Abigail teared up. Avoiding my gaze, she asked, How long have you known? I stayed silent, letting her stew. You didn't do anything wrong. She said softly, We had a great marriage and an amazing sex life, at least until you got sick with that stomach bug and stopped being intimate for a while. Oh God, that's when you found out? I nodded, watching her scramble. It started about 3 months ago. She confessed at first. We didn't even sleep together. Jeff flirted a lot, but I brushed it off. Then one day he said he missed the wild, rough passion he used to have. I listened that night. I was really into you at first. I was trying to prove I still loved you, but after that I wanted more. I started craving the high, and Jeff offered to give it to me. Eventually, I gave in. She wiped her eyes and her voice was trembling. She said it wasn't love, it was carnal. It was something she couldn't do with me. You, because I loved you too much. You mean you love cheating? I said quietly. She flinched but didn't deny it. Can't you forgive me? Claim me again. Make me yours, she pleaded, her voice breaking. Bend me over and take me until I cry. If that's what you need, just don't send me away. I handed her the pants. Earlier, there's nothing to reclaim. You gave yourself to him. I said, without another word, that I was sorry. She dressed, picked up her shoes and purse, and walked out the door. She paused on the porch, waiting for me to call her back. I'm sorry, George, she whispered, before driving away. Once she was gone, I turned off uploaded the recordings to the cloud and called the lieutenant handling my case. I said, "This is George Peterson. I've got a video you're going to want to see." While I was making video copies, my phone buzzed with a call from Abigail. I answered, curious about what she had to say. She was home from the meeting with George. She said he remembers everything, every detail. "I'm glad you didn't come. He might have shot you if you'd shown up." I listened carefully as her tone shifted. I knew recording the conversation was a bad idea. She admitted that he called her out on it, so she stripped to prove she wasn't wired. "He's that angry, Jeff. I even asked him to take me to bed, but he wasn't having it." Jeff's laugh was bitter and cold. He said I was a fool and a total loser, too scared even for revenge sex. Abigail sighed. "Good thing he doesn't have any proof. We've been screwing without it, so his accusations are worthless." She corrected herself. "We've been screwing. As if that makes a difference," Jeff replied. "Sharon's keeping an eye on me. She's looking for proof to invoke the prenup. If I can get a clean 50-50 split and avoid paying alimony, I'll still have the brokerage. I can live on that. I can't support myself if George divorces me." With a worried tone, she said that even with alimony, it won't be enough. She just hopes he moves on. She'll do anything, from counseling to a post-an agreement, whatever it takes. She'll even wear a chastity belt if he asks. Jeff scoffed and said that there's no point, as he's a loser. She'll send some business his way to keep him afloat, but they're laying low for now. There'll be no screwing. Abigail asked what he said about the money until the assault charge clears. He turned it down and said he'd need to see proof of the transfer first. He thinks I'm lying about the account and wouldn't pay anyway, Abigail explained, and Jeff laughed again, nastier this time. Heck, probably has a point. Even if he agreed, I'd hand him $25, 0000 UPF front, and accuse him of blackmail if he asked for more than $100. 0000. I could have him taken out for less than that. Abigail's voice turned sharp. "Don't say that again, Jeff. If you so much as joke about hurting him, I'll confess to everything. I'll record a full confession and send it to the police." If George gets so much as dizzy and falls, Jeff quickly backtracked. "Come on, I'm just running my mouth. I'd never do something like that." I recorded the entire conversation. I felt a mix of disgust and triumph when I heard that Lieutenant Hudson had arrived at the camp to review the evidence I had. He was impressed by the recording of Abigail's visit and took it to the assistant district attorney handling the case. He said it was great news. "We've got the forensic results back too. There's DNA evidence on your pants along with fluid smears on your leg. It matches the story you told us about kicking him in the groin, on the sofa carpet, and even near the door has matching traces. This might be enough to upgrade the charges against Jeff to attempted murder." "What about Abigail?" I asked. "She could face charges too. Hudson admitted her skin and blood under your fingernails show she definitely grabbed you. Her claim that she was stopping you from pulling your pistol could. It's up in the air, but the jury will decide. She's more likely to face accomplice charges, a $500 fine, and up to 5 years in prison." "That seems a bit extreme to me," Hudson said. "The law isn't perfect. The DA is leaning towards leniency for Abigail. If she testifies against Jeff, I'm not sure what I think. I don't like what Abigail did, but I don't want her destroyed completely." That evening, my father and George, we just got back from our cruise and turned on our phones. We had messages saying you've been hurt and might not make it, then more saying you were okay and discharged. "Are you all right?" I replied, but those messages leave a lot out. I didn't fall, I was pushed. Abigail's boss tried to kill me. After I caught them in my living room, I heard Edward gasp and then say something to his wife. She seemed shocked. He told me I needed to talk to Abigail and hear her side of the story. I wasn't home at the time, so I told him I wasn't able to talk then and ended the call. The next morning, I called my lawyer to check on the divorce paperwork. The papers were ready, but they needed Abigail's current location. The process server had checked her office in the apartment but hadn't found her. Later, Hudson called with an update. They'd arrested Jeff and Abigail at work. He'd taken the audio and video files to Ada, who filed additional charges. He told me to be careful about discussing the bribe, as it could make it look like I was open to taking the money. He said that was nonsense, and I replied that I just wanted proof to pass to Sharon Russell, who's already working with her lawyer to track the money. Hudson nodded and said, I should write a statement saying that it's best to leave that investigation to others. Information obtained illegally can't be used in court. Your recordings are fine, though, since you were part of the conversation. Jeff's charges were upgraded to attempted murder, and Abigail was charged as an accomplice. I hated what she'd done, but I didn't want her completely destroyed, especially if she testified against Jeff. I made sure my lawyer knew where she was, so she'd get the divorce papers as soon as she was released. My brother Greg and I went back to the apartment the next day to get my things. I just wanted my clothes, my desktop computer, and the pistols I kept locked in the safe. I left the rest, including anything that reminded me of Abigail. I could stay, as we packed. Sylvia arrived with her younger sister, Bella. Sylvia gave me a big hug. She said, "I can't believe Abigail would throw away what you two have for a fling." She added, "Is there any way you could work through this, not now, but maybe after counseling?" Bella shook her head, clearly disagreeing. Sylvia pressed on. "Just before Edward and I left on our cruise, Abigail said you were trying for a baby. We were so excited for you too." I sighed, feeling the weight of it all. "This isn't a simple fling, Sylvia. It went on for months. I have proof, in audio, video, and text. The evidence is overwhelming." Sylvia's face darkened. She made it sound like it was a one-time thing. "There's a time mistake, and you were being unforgiving." I said firmly, "It's bad. I don't want to hurt you with it, but the evidence is damning." Sylvia squared her shoulders. "I'm a grown woman, George. I want to see everything. I don't care how bad it is. Cheating infuriates me. I had plenty of chances to stray from Edward over the years. I never did, though. I agreed to share the audio files from my meeting with Abigail, along with the other recordings with her mother, Sylvia. Abigail's going to need your support. I said she's in for a tough legal battle." Sylvia nodded. "We'll support her, but that doesn't mean we condone what she did." She replied firmly, "I told them. I was planning to move out and let Abigail stay in the apartment, but Sylvia quickly said that wasn't going to happen. Abigail is going to be staying with us for now. Bella, her younger sister, wanted her to stay, so she went to pack some of Abigail's things. This is all so messy," Bella muttered, shaking her head as she rummaged through the closet. "You don't even know the half of it," I replied. "I was 17 when you and Abigail got together. I was dating a football player, not sleeping with him. I was just dating your mum, who made such a big deal about how Abigail hit the jackpot. She found a guy who'd love her forever, like your dad. He wasn't big or flashy, but he was good. You looked like someone a girl could count on, smart and loyal." I laughed. "You're making me sound like a border collie." Bella smirked. "Don't be an ass. You know what I mean." I envied my sister. I kept dating guys, hoping to find someone like you know, but I never did. She stepped closer, wrapping her arms around me in a hug. "I'm just going to come out and say it. If my sister's dumb enough to give you up, I want you. I've loved you for a long time, George. I want you to know I'm here." I didn't know how to respond. I hugged her back, trying not to think about how close she was. She leaned up and kissed me, and I couldn't deny the effect she had on me. It seemed like Abigail's entire family had that power. I pulled back gently, thanking her for her love and honesty. She smiled, but didn't push further. "I'm moving to the fish camp," I said, changing the subject. I didn't want to talk about it. "Abigail doesn't have to leave the apartment." Bella shook her head. "Mama isn't having it. Abigail messed things up with you. She wants her back." I suggested to my mother that I move in with Abigail, but she said no. She keeps telling me to live my own life and make my own decisions. Greg walked by, carrying another box to the car. My cast prevents me from lifting anything heavy, and the doctor warned me about overexerting myself. Bella leaned in with a mischievous grin. "She knows where my fish camp is. George, you better get ready for me to visit, and maybe by then you'll be up for a little exertion." "Hey there," a voice called from behind us. I turned to see Stella, the neighbor from across the landing. "You're up and about," she said, smiling warmly. Then her eyes fell on the boxes we were stacking. "You're not trying to carry those, are you? I know you're not supposed to lift anything." "I had a pretty bad concussion." I raised an eyebrow. "How do you know how bad my injuries were, or what my doctor's orders are?" "Thanks anyway for helping me when I was hurt. I heard you were right there checking on me." Stella, too, at her scrub top's name. "Tag. I'm a nurse. I work in critical care right near where you were treated. I mostly do cardiac, not neuro. Lucy, the nurse taking care of you, was my roommate in nursing school. I kept tabs on you." I chuckled. "The doctor said I just had a little swelling." Stella laughed and shook her head. "It's like saying you had a minor heart attack or were just a little pregnant. You had a significant injury, and it's taking longer than expected. My advice is to push back and aim for the minimum of 7 to 10 days. I thanked her for her concern and told her that my brother was doing most of the lifting. I just packed clothes, I said, waving towards the bags. Stella replied, I was scared that night. I don't deal with neuro cases, but I was trained when I saw you lying there. I worried you might have broken your neck if you had moved. It could have been fatal. I could only do so much. Loosen your tie, check your eyes, and hope you didn't move. Thankfully, the ambulance arrived pretty quickly. Do you still have the video you took? I asked Stella. She nodded. My mom actually took most of the pictures and videos, but I have copies. Give me your number and I'll send them to you after I sent the video to Bella, who leaned over my shoulder to watch it with me. She snorted. No doubt what they were doing. Abigail is going to freak out when she finds out you saw her with that freshly drilled look. Stella smirked. You must be Abigail's sister. You look a lot like hers. She leaned in and hugged me. Give me a shout if you need to chat, she whispered in my ear. And take care of yourself, George. Slow and steady. No exertion. She turned to leave, and I couldn't help but notice a bit of a wobble in her step, or maybe it was just my imagination. Greg chuckled as we drove away. Your mother. If she weren't married, she'd be all over you. She's classy and loves her husband, but you can tell she's impressed by you. I laughed. Yeah, well, that's not happening. Greg wasn't done. Abigail's sister wants you too. She'd hop into bed with you if you let her, and that neighbor, the nurse, she's definitely interested. Come on, I said, shaking my head. Don't deny it. It's messed up, but you've got options. Little brother, he said with a laugh. By the time we reached the fish camp, I felt pretty drained. I wanted the divorce to be as straightforward as possible, so I told my lawyer to offer Abigail a deal. I'd cover half her rent and utilities if she stayed in the apartment alone. I even offered to pay half of Abigail's grocery bill, as long as it was spent on food for her alone and not on takeout or restaurant meals. I also agreed to keep her on my cell phone plan. This support would last for 2 years, which would give her enough time to get back on her feet. When her lawyer did the math, he realized this was far better than the percentage of my income she'd get through the law. I knew he must have explained to her how restrictive it would be otherwise, because she accepted my terms and signed without hesitation. Of course, Abigail had bigger problems than our divorce. She was facing charges for being an accomplice after the fact, accused of helping Jeff cover up his attempt to harm me. She was released on her own recognizance. After her first court appearance, Jeff wasn't so lucky. His attempted murder charge meant a new bail had to be set, and without access to his frozen accounts, he couldn't pay the bondsman fee. Sharon had taken 70% of their joint cash and locked down their investment accounts, leaving him with no collateral to secure a loan. I imagine him sitting in his cell, frustrated. Someone who once thought of himself as a big shot was now just another inmate. Sharon wasn't just out for revenge. She was also very efficient. When I told her about Jeff's secret account in the Caribbean, she wasted no time investigating. I was surprised to find out that the account was real. Sharon, her lawyer, and her son flew to Jamaica to retrieve the funds. Even though Jeff's son wasn't on the signature card, the account was in his name, so he could legally transfer the money. I would have loved to see Jeff's face when he found out his hidden stash was gone. The account was in Jeff's son's name, so it wasn't considered community property. On top of that, the IRS was bound to come after him for improperly giving money to a minor, no matter who ended up paying the taxes. Jeff wasn't going to see a dime of that money again. Sharon later told me that her son split the funds with his siblings, using it to pay for their college expenses. At least the Russell boys were honest with each other by the time my divorce from Abigail was finalized. The divorce was finalized, but her criminal trial was still months away. It was linked to Jeff's trial because she was accused of helping him cover up his role in my attack. Sharon had ensured Jeff's financial resources were severely limited. He eventually agreed to sell his real estate franchise to fund his defense, signing a clause that barred him from starting another brokerage within 50 miles for 5 years. That alone made me smile while waiting for the trial. Sharon and I had some. There were a few moments of dark humor about getting back at Jeff and Abigail. At one point, I joked about making a scandalous video to send to Jeff, just to mess with his head. Sharon laughed, calling me a sick bastard, but she admitted the idea had some appeal. You really want to stick it to them, don't you? She said with a grin. We ultimately decided against it, but the thought alone was satisfying. The week before Jeff was supposed to make bail, Sharon and I visited him in jail. We spoke through a plexiglass window. Jeff scowled as soon as he saw me. "Why the hell are you here?" he snapped. Sharon leaned closer to the glass. "Because I deserve to be," she said, winking at him. I couldn't resist baiting him. I made a few crude gestures and mimed a suggestive motion with my hands. Jeff turned bright red. His face contorted with rage. He picked up his chair and slammed it against the plexiglass repeatedly, shouting obscenities. The guards quickly subdued him. I later heard that Jeff spent 3 weeks in segregation, and that his bail was delayed because he was now considered a threat to Sharon and me at his trial. Jeff ended up incriminating himself. He glared at me through much of the proceedings, barely paying attention to the testimony. When he took the stand, he initially denied threatening me, but then he started ranting, He called me a liar and insulted my family. His lawyer looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. The forensic evidence proved my story. Jeff had dragged me 15 feet to the top of the stairs before throwing me down. His outburst only reinforced the jury's decision. He was sentenced to 10 years instead of the possible 15. It was enough to ruin him. Abigail's testimony didn't help his case. She admitted that Jeff had once mentioned hiring someone to get rid. She also confirmed that he had made up the story about me overreacting and falling, accidentally, at her own trial. She repeated this testimony, claiming she had been terrified at the time and had thought I was dead despite her cooperation. She was sentenced to a year in jail, but the judge reduced her sentence to 3 months. However, he refused to let her off completely, citing her initial false statements to the police. When Abigail was released, she came to see me. "I'd like to apologize for everything," she said. "I'd also like to thank you for not sharing that video. It was bad enough that you gave Mom the audio. She let me have it for what I did, cheating on you, destroying our marriage. She even saw Stella's mom's video. She told me that if you weren't such a gentleman, you'd have shown it to everyone and disgraced me completely. You deserve that lecture." I replied. Abigail's voice broke. "Is there any way we could work through this, maybe with counseling? I'd even sign a postnup," but I shook my head. It didn't stop Jeff, so why would I think a postnup would stop you? Tears welled in her eyes. "I got stupid, George. I should have talked to you. Can we at least stay friends? Bella told me she wants to be with you someday, but that's not going to happen," I said firmly. Abigail left quietly, wishing me well and hoping I'd forgive her one day. Bella was persistent, but I ended it before it could start. I liked her, but I knew dating her would. I ended all contact with them because I felt like they were causing problems within their family. I saw them around town from time to time, but that was it. Abigail moved to Mobile and got a job as a sales rep for a manufacturing company. I figured she'd find someone else soon enough. In the meantime, Stella and I moved forward. We dated for a year before getting married and decided to start a family right away. She shared my views on trust and communication, which made all the difference. Life was good, but I kept an eye on the calendar, knowing Jeff would be released from prison a few months after the trial. I heard about Jeff's time in jail. He'd been moved to a new unit after getting into trouble and segregation. Rumor had it he'd been beaten in the showers and humiliated in unspeakable ways. I couldn't resist. I sent him a smiley face card with a message. "If you think I paid someone to do it, you're absolutely right. Maybe I'm a jerk, but only to those who try to hurt me."